Coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter Podcast, fellow Sarc fighter Tony Haskel shares the story of how sarcoidosis attacked his heart.
And then I started noticing that I would get up from a table and I'd be just a little bit dizzy.
And Tony is one of those healthy, fit people who never saw it coming.
And also it got to a point where I'd have to stop every 5 minutes because I was so heavily fatigued and dizzy.
It's all coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter Podcast.
This is the Sarc Fighter Podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 83 of the FSR Sarc Fighter Podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin, and this episode is brought to you by aTyr Pharmaceuticals. To learn more about their new pulmonary sarcoidosis trial called EFZO-FIT, visit stopsarcoidosis.org/aTyr trial. That's ATYR trial. And there is a link in the show notes. And I'll be talking a little bit more about aTyr here in this episode because I want you to be looking for a bonus episode that'll be released here in the next few days, because on Saturday, just 2 days ago, prior to when I'm recording right now, FSR hosted another town hall meeting. This time it was on the prospect of a new drug that's on the horizon that could replace prednisone as the first line of defense for sarcoidosis patients. And we've talked about prednisone at length here on the Sarc Fighter Podcast, but basically it's a double-edged sword because prednisone works. It takes down that inflammation that's causing all the damage, but it has so many side effects that are detrimental to a person's health, to their attitude, to their mental health, and it can have long-lasting physical effects on your body as well if you are forced to stay on prednisone for a long time. Well, aTyr has come up with a drug, or is working through a very long and expensive process on a drug that could replace prednisone as that first line of defense. So FSR asked me to moderate the discussion with Sanjay Shukla, the CEO of aTyr, whose drug efzofitimod is now in stage 3 of the clinical trials, which means they're right on the verge of having FDA approval. So joining us on this panel were FSR patient advocate and navigator and fellow Sarc fighter and friend Jim Kuhn, who fights sarcoidosis every day, but he is like the uber volunteer when it comes to helping FSR out and helping fellow patients out. Also on the panel was Dr. Shambhu Arel of Innova Health, and then FSR CEO Mary McGowan. And together, all of us looked at how aTyr still needs participants in the clinical trial to prove the effectiveness of efzofitimod. These clinical trials are not easy, and it'll be a year from when the last person is recruited and participates before they can study and publish the results and hopefully move forward in the next step towards approval. But basically, stage 3 is where you start looking for that FDA approval. So we're so close to getting it done. This drug has been proved safe in the initial trials. They're very encouraging. Some patients have been able to wean themselves off of prednisone without having flares while taking efzofitimod. So again, all the key players were in the room talking about how there is hope on the horizon. And as soon as I get the audio file from that town hall, which was recorded, I will produce it up and I will put it out there as a bonus episode. Okay. Another thing I have to tell you about that I am very excited about. The Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is proud to host the inaugural Sarcoidosis Crystal Awards Gala celebrating connections, collaboration, and catalyzing research. It'll be on May 24th in Washington, D.C., bringing together the sarcoidosis community. This will be an evening that celebrates clinicians, researchers, and advocates from all around the globe, worldwide, who are leading the charge to advance Sarc research and, if you will, carve a path toward better treatments and a cure. And early bird tickets are available until March 31st of 2023. Go to stopsarcoidosis.org, the FSR website, to learn more. Well, so some of you may be aware, and I announced this on the previous podcast, that they're handing out 4 awards at that gala, and I will be the recipient of one of them. I was so surprised that this little project that I'm doing in my home office, the FSR Sarc Fighter Podcast, has been so helpful to the cause that when they have an awards gala and it's the first one they have, they thought of me as someone being worthy to receive one of these awards, and I'm just flabbergasted and humbled. And that's about all I want to say about that. I'm going to continue to talk about it on the podcast between now and May because I want as many people as possible to be aware and to go to the gala because I want to meet as many of you in person as possible. But I don't feel super comfortable saying, hey, look at me, I won this award. On the other hand, I can't really invite you to the gala without mentioning that. But what I can do is I can tell you about the other 3 honorees. And so the other honorees are the Sarcoidosis Crystal Award for Excellence in Research and Clinical Care will go to Marjolaine Drent, MD and PhD, FSR Scientific Advisory Board member and Professor Emeritus ILD at the Faculty of Health Medicine and Life Sciences at the Maastricht University in the Netherlands, and a guest senior researcher at the ILD Center of Excellence in also in the Netherlands. So, wow, right? Then there's the FSR Crystal Community Engagement Award that goes to George A. Mensa, MD and FACC, the director of the Center for Translation Research and Implementation Science at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which is part of the National Institutes of Health. Okay, and that's amazing. And this is so far above my head in terms of these researchers and the brain power that you must have to reach that level. And so to think of myself being in receiving an award at the same time as these people is incredible. And I would say the same for the Crystal Spotlight Award, which goes to Gerald Prescott Galian, who is an actress, big time, best known for her roles in AMC's The Walking Dead, the DC Universe's The Swamp Thing, where she played Madame Xanadu, Netflix's Resort to Love, and most recently, All the Queen's Men. Also, she's been on BET+, and she is a sarcoidosis advocate and spokesperson for FSR's Ignore No More African American Women and the Sarcoidosis National Campaign. So those are the other 3 honorees, and this is just such an honor, and I just really hope you'll consider joining me and the other honorees at the gala in Washington, D.C., which is coming up on May 24th. There's a link in the show notes, and if you want more information, go to the FSR website. I also want to remind you that our fellow Sarc fighter Royce Robertson is doing a fundraising bike ride this summer that will take 3 days to complete as he rides about 70 miles a day from Buffalo, New York to Syracuse, New York. He is calling this Cycle for Sarc. That's cycle with the numeral 4 and then Sarc, Cycle for Sarc. And if you've been listening, you know that I had hoped to join him on this bike ride. I talk about cycling a lot on the podcast. I hope that's okay with you, but it's an important part of my life. In fact, I got out this past weekend. We had a beautiful day here in March. Don't want to get sidetracked here, but if you've been listening, you also know that there were too many schedule conflicts. So I won't be joining him, but I have made a donation, and I want to continue to support him by bringing what he's doing to light here on the podcast and on my social media channels. And I really hope this grows into a movement in support of FSR, and that someday there will be a whole group of us riding along the old Erie Canal, the Barge Canal in New York State, and fundraising for sarcoidosis. But he is still looking for people to join him this year, but I can't do it. So, but I have made a donation to his account, which is part of KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. I am asking you to do the same thing. All the information to donate is in the show notes, or you can go to the FSR website, and then there's a drop down there that says Join Team KISS. And then if you scroll down, you'll see Royce's page called Cycle for Sarc. So since I can't be there to ride with Royce, I'm doing all I can to get him some support. So let's do it, folks. Let's make a donation, no matter how big or how small. The idea is to support somebody who is raising money in support of all of us. Okay? So now to today's interview. Tony Haskel's body just seemed to be shutting down on him. He didn't know why, and when you hear about all he does, it's kind of amazing, because you would think that if you were super fit and super active and you ate reasonably well, that you would not be attacked by sarcoidosis, that your body would just fend it off. Well, once again, Sarc intervened and has tried to sideline this man whose life literally, other than work, revolves around being active and enjoying the outdoors. And Tony Haskel's story is next here on the FSR Sarc Fighter Podcast.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter Podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Welcome back to the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Joining me now is fellow Sarc fighter Tony Haskel. Tony, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to finally connect with you, and I've learned a lot from your podcast since I'm fairly new to this game. It's been a real educational tool for me to understand it a little bit more.
Well, I'm glad that the podcast has been helpful. So you started scratching around, found the podcast, about 9 months ago, when you found out that there was a word called sarcoidosis?
I actually, I Googled podcasts on the subject after I had my procedure for the defibrillator pacemaker, just because I'm a huge podcast fan and figured there's got to be something on this, and lo and behold, there was. And it's been a great tool for me to understand it more and the people behind it.
Great. When did you find out? First of all, you have cardiac Sarc, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. When did you find out, and how did you find out?
Kind of a little bit of a convoluted story. I might back up from there just to give you a little bit of context, and the listeners a little bit of context. So when I was in freshman year in college, I was foolishly trying out for the hockey team. That lasted a few days before they said, thanks very much, but no thanks. But the doctor there diagnosed me with a heart murmur. So that's the first time that I had something cardiac where, half the country has a heart murmur, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But then in about 2007 or 8, I felt some numbing in my left forearm, and my best friend from college is in the cardiac pulmonary therapy up at Columbia Presbyterian, and he had me go up there right away. And I was diagnosed with several different things: bicuspid aortic valve, a mitral valve prolapse, and left branch block, which basically means that sooner or later I'll need a valve replacement. It could be next year, it could be 20 years from now. So I've been seeing a cardiologist since about 2007, 2008 up at Columbia for many years now. So that in the context of, I would always just get checked out at least annually to make sure everything was going okay.
Yeah.
But with that said, this all happened pretty quickly. During COVID, I was up with I have a twin brother and two older brothers, and my twin brother and one of the older brothers both have places up in Stratton, Vermont. So there was about 10 or 11 of us up in Stratton for many months. And, I've been cycling for, over a decade, but I got more serious during the time up in Vermont just because there wasn't that much to do.
Good thing to do during a pandemic is to ride a bike, isn't it?
Yeah. And you and I were talking before we started this, but, I would bike from the top of Stratton to Okemo around Bromley. These are some serious hills and some pretty big rides. And so I got into really good shape. And during this time, I have a good friend out in San Francisco. He and his wife moved out there several years ago, and I used to ride with him when he was on the East Coast, and he got me into getting some more sophisticated gear for my bike. And I'm just giving you this in context.
Sure.
Garmin, you got me on the Garmin, which basically tracks your cadence, your speed, how much you're climbing, and also got me wearing a heart monitor, which I had never worn before.
Mm-hmm.
And he also got me into Strava, which is an app for cyclists and runners and athletes, pretty much like a social media app, but for athletes.
Yeah,
And
I've got all of those, all three of those things I have. So.
Yeah, and that's how I found Royce
Yep.
On Strava, who was a prior person that you interviewed. So long story short, I was up in Vermont and had all this, started using Strava and the Garmin and heart monitor. And then also for my birthday, which was up there, I got an Apple Watch, which I wore when I slept to understand my sleep patterns and try to understand that. And it would also have my resting heart rate. There you go.
Yeah.
And for those that can't see, John wears one as well.
Yeah.
So I was kind of getting to be a real data geek. And I think that really saved me here, because I would say in June of last year, I started noticing when I get all these alerts on my watch that my heart rate was falling below 40.
Just when you were sitting around then?
When I was sitting around, but a lot of the times when I was sleeping, my heart rate I'd get these dings on my watch. Your heart rate's going below 40. And then oftentimes it was at 30. And I also felt when I would be doing these, remember I have all this data from my rides that I was doing in 2020, 21, then on the indoor bike, when I was at the gym, just where everything was recorded in terms of my heart rate, my cadence, how efficiently I was doing it and everything else. And then I started noticing that I would get up from a table and I'd be just a little bit dizzy. And I signed up for this 100-mile charity ride up in Middlebury, Vermont for the Kelly Brush Foundation, which I do along with another charity. I kind of flip-flop and I do it with a bunch of friends up there. And so I started training for this. And I usually do, aside from the charity ride, I do one or two other 100-mile rides, but gearing up for, on the weekends, anywhere from 50 to 80 mile
right.
ride.
Just go out and ride your bike 50 to 80 miles. And when you're in top shape, 100 miles one sitting in one day. Right.
Right. And I noticed that during the week when I was doing, 20, 30 mile training rides, that I started having difficulty. I could tell that my effort wasn't up to par with when I could see on my Strava what I had done in prior rides. And also got to a point where I'd have to stop every 5 minutes because I was so heavily fatigued and dizzy, like really, really heavily fatigued and dizzy. So during this time, I started, I went to my cardiologist. They did an EKG. They did I remember them going in there and checking my heart rate, and they said, your heart rate's at 30, and I said, yeah, that's why I'm here. And so they couldn't find anything with the EKG. Then when I went to go see an ear, nose, and throat doctor, I thought it was because of my deviated septum. I couldn't breathe. I even went in to get a couple of COVID tests because I thought maybe I had COVID and I have long COVID, and I didn't even realize it. I just couldn't figure out what this was. And so time passed along into July and then into August. And at this point, I just was really having a lot of difficulty. Like I remember going out for one ride. I literally went like 3 miles and turned right back, and I just cannot figure it out. So the time came for me, it was the weekend after Labor Day, and I went up to Vermont for this ride, and I did the 25-mile ride. There's no way I could do the 100-mile ride. And I struggled on it. And I came back, and I was scheduled for a stress test. And I went in for the stress test and didn't even make it to go have the stress test because they take your blood pressure as well as your pulse, and my blood pressure was way too high and my heart rate was way too low, and they said, too dangerous to do this. We understand what is wrong with you now, and it was a heart block, which I knew meant that I was probably going to need a pacemaker. And I talked to my best friend, who works at Columbia, and he's cagey because he doesn't want telling me anything without me seeing the cardiologist, but pretty much we knew that I was looking at a pacemaker. So I was scheduled to get a pacemaker on September 28th at Columbia. And that was a Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday. And the prior Thursday or Friday, I went in for a cardiac MRI because they just wanted to check all the bases. And so, the weekend goes along and I haven't gotten the test results back. And then my cardiologist's office says that Dr. Lee would like to see you at her office at 5:00 the night before my procedure. And I said, this can't be good.
That can't be good. Yeah.
So, so I go in there and she explains exactly what I have, which is obviously I've never heard of this before. And also due to some insurance situation, because in the month, and we wanted to get this done in the month of September, she said, I want you to leave here right now, and I want you to go to immediately the emergency room. And I was like, all right, I'll just drive there.
Leave the doctor's office and go to the ER.
Yeah.
Which nobody wants to do, but okay.
It was due for a variety of reasons, but I said, fine, I'll drive there. She goes, no, you can't drive there. You got to have someone drive you. I was like, I'll take the train in. She's like, no, can't take the train in, because my heart rate was down at, I went into the emergency room and they weren't messing around. They got me up there like lickety split. And there's about 8 doctors waiting for me as the elevator opened up. And
really?
They were,
so she had called ahead on your behalf?
They called ahead, but basically once they saw my heart rate down at around 26, 27, they weren't going to mess around.
Yeah.
And the doctors were pretty shocked that I was talking like I'm talking to you right now and standing and having a conversation with that heart rate. So long story short, they, and she also said, let me back up for 1 second. During that meeting, she said, we're going to have to change the device from a pacemaker to a defibrillator pacemaker. I'm learning exactly what the differences are and why, and obviously Googling as fast as I can to figure out what exactly this is. And so that was, long story short, I went in that night, was in ICU that night, and then had the procedure the next day. And since we had the procedure done late that afternoon, I stayed over that night, and then I walked out the next day and felt fine. Yeah. And then after that, they wanted me to recover for, you can't do anything with your left arm for, I couldn't do push-ups. I couldn't do weight work. They didn't want me doing anything for at least a couple of weeks. And then kind of back to normal, except that after about a month or so, I went on a beta blocker. And then the first week in January, I went in for a PET scan because they wanted to see how active the Sarc was. And
So they knew you had Sarc. That was what was blocking.
that's
That
what
was
caused the
causing
electrical.
blockage.
That's what caused the electrical issue between the top and the bottom of the heart. Yes.
Okay. So it was in your heart itself. It wasn't in a valve. It was causing an electrical. The top and bottom are supposed to talk to each other, and it was essentially blocking that signal, right?
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
Okay. So they knew that, but you walked out. You had the pacemaker with the defibrillator, and they put you on beta blockers, which happens fairly often whenever there's a situation like that. With or without sarcoidosis. So then now you're up to the PET scan and they're looking.
So my doctor wanted to, as you know, there's debate amongst the community, the medical community, as to how to treat Sarc, and they wanted to be fairly conservative if they could and not put me on prednisone. But they did the PET scan and another EKG, and they didn't like what they saw. So they put me on prednisone, starting at 40 milligrams, and then tapering from there. And then put me on, let's see, what else? Fosamax, Cellcept. I'm now on Entresto. So I take a cocktail of drugs every day. It's I need an Excel spreadsheet to sort it all out sometimes.
Right.
And that's where I'm at right now. I'm tapered down significantly on the prednisone. So the side effects, I feel like I've put on probably about 8 pounds or so, which I guess in the long and short of it, it's not that big of a deal. Family and friends say they can't see it, but I can certainly feel it.
Right.
And that's where I'm at now.
So yeah, as a gym guy, you'll notice 8 pounds faster than anybody else will, for sure. I put on over 20. I was taking 80 milligrams, and that was hard. That was hard to lose afterwards, even though I tried to be, and I would say for the most part, continued to be reasonably active initially. But yeah, so that's
80
tough.
milligrams is a lot.
Pardon me?
80 milligrams is double what I started at. So that's a lot.
That's a lot. So walking around and everything right now, you're okay. Like you get up in the morning and you take all this medicine, which you don't like, but otherwise you're reasonably okay.
Yeah. I feel, sometimes I feel a little bit fatigued. I don't know if that's because I'm 55 and I don't know, maybe I'm supposed to feel a little more fatigued.
It's aging.
55.
Yeah, it's aging.
And, but I have a feeling some of it's from the side effects of everything I'm taking, which I think is normal. And if that's the worst side effect, I have a cup of coffee and get through the day. And other than that, I go to the gym every day and do different exercises or, do long walks and here and there. And I feel very lucky in terms of, maybe it's because I'm still at the outset of combating this. I know there's, listening to your podcast, that there's others who have been dealing with this for many years, and it's an up and down journey. But where I'm at right now, I feel pretty good of where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Does your doctor believe that it is controlled and permanently controlled?
I lost you there for 1 second because you froze.
Sure. Does your doctor believe that this is controlled?
I haven't asked her that. I don't think they believe anything's controlled until they see it controlled and the inflammation down. I mean, I'm on all these cocktail of drugs to reduce the inflammation and to hopefully, put it in recession. But I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah. When will you get another heart scan where they can look at it and do a comparison to the last one?
Yeah, I'm having a PET scan at the end of April.
Soon, then, because we're talking March 20th, 2023 for listeners.
Yeah, probably. And it literally just scheduled it today, this morning. So I believe it's April 28th. I'll have my next PET scan.
Yeah. And you are fortunate enough to live near really good skiing in Vermont. You've skied a fair amount this winter and it hasn't been too bad?
Hasn't been too bad. I haven't skied as much as I'd like, probably because the conditions haven't been that great. But we did get a great powder day. I think it was during President's Day weekend, and I was skiing with two of my brothers, and a lot of powder. I definitely felt more winded than perhaps I normally would, but I felt pretty good out there. I have not been out west this year or last year, which I think with the altitude out there would have definitely tested me in terms of how I would do. But otherwise, skiing as strong as I normally would, and I've blown 2 ACLs, so probably not doing as many moguls as before, but otherwise skiing pretty hard.
Yeah, that's good. And it's good to hear that everything is okay and your defibrillator has not gone off then.
No, it has not.
Okay.
I had a little bit of issues where they had to tweak it probably a week, twice after the procedure, because there's some issues. One when I was out to lunch, and one when I was sleeping, where this thing was cranking up at like 170, and my heart rate was like 170 for a couple hours, 2-3 hours at a time. So they had to tweak it, and I have had no further problems from that point on.
Gotcha. So let's back up and talk a little bit about you in particular. You live in Connecticut.
Right. I moved to Greenwich, Connecticut from New York City in August of 21. I pretty much, after college, I went with my best friend, who was the guy who was at Columbia, to be a ski hockey bum out in Aspen, Colorado for a year. And then I grew up in the Westchester area, came back to that area and got a job in the media business. And pretty much, aside from 3 years in Los Angeles and the year in Colorado, and then another year in Boulder with the skiing and Warren Miller properties, I've been on the Upper West Side in New York. But I think when I came back from Vermont during COVID, I just said, I'm ready for a switch out of the city. And so I've been here since August of 2021.
Here is in Connecticut, correct?
Out of Connecticut. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. And so how has sarcoidosis impacted your daily life with family, siblings, whatever? How has it changed what you're up against?
It really hasn't impacted me yet. I think when I had to explain everything to my family, obviously they were concerned. It's not the easiest thing to explain to someone, because I'm still searching for answers. I don't have all the answers. It's going to be an ongoing, thing where I'm going to have to deal with. And there's going to be, again, just learning as much as I can. There's going to be some twists and turns in the road. I don't think this is something that's ever going to 100% go away. Hopefully it goes in recession and I can forget about it, but I don't think it's 100% going away. So in that regard, just explaining it to friends and family has been a challenge, just to have everyone kind of get their arms around it. But in terms of my daily life, aside from just feeling a little bit fatigued and maybe just a little bit out of breath sometimes, hasn't really affected me yet. I haven't had any, mental or emotional impacts yet. I forget the name of the woman that you had on here, I think last time, where she, had a lot of a side effect. She also has, I believe, 4 young kids.
Yeah, Sam. Yeah, Sam Wassel.
Which is certainly a tough thing to go through. But I haven't had that situation. I've just been pretty much clear-eyed here. It's like, what do I need to do to move forward, and just do it. Been very, I haven't had any lows about this. It's just like, let's get this procedure done, and whatever I have to do, let's just do it. Let's go.
So you had told me earlier that you feel like now that winter is ending and you'll be back outside riding your bike, that's when you will know for sure. Is that fair? Is that how you feel?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I don't want to predict what's going to happen, but I think because my heart rate is artificially low due to the drugs I'm taking, that I don't think my performance will be what it would have been a year or two ago. And I think I just have to be fine with that. You know, I just want to be out there riding my bike and you know, enjoying being out there and not be so concerned with, you know, what my miles per hour are and what my friends are doing on Strava. And you know, it's as you know, with cycling, it's more about competition with yourself than is anyone else, unless you're a racer or something like that.
For sure. For sure. And so if I ride the same route 3 or 4 times in a row, every time I ride it, I'm trying to do it a little bit faster than I did it the time before. And I think to me, that's just human nature. Maybe some people can go and I really do enjoy just being outdoors and so forth and looking at the scenery, but performance at some level is also important to me.
Right. Yeah. You want to be at a certain, I mean, you're out there to enjoy yourself, but at the same time, you know, you want to perform well on the bike, because if you're working out and stuff, that's the whole goal of it is to be better.
Yeah, for sure. So you don't really know, I mean, you're less than a year since diagnosis. You don't really know if the sarcoidosis is getting worse or staying the same. You know, so far the medicine and the pacemaker have combined and they work. But other people listening will say, oh, well, what happens if he has a flare, which has happened to, unfortunately, to most of us, where sarcoidosis doesn't just go away on its own and self-resolve. Are you worried about that?
Right. No, I can't be worried with something I can't control right now. I just can't. You know, I say that perhaps naively because it hasn't happened yet, but I can only control what I can control. And if that takes place, then I'll have to deal with it then. But it's not something I'm going to be worried about or in the back of my mind moving forward. You know, for me at least, it's hard to live that way.
For sure. So when do you get back on the bike? When do you think you'll have? Do you think? Well, let me ask you this: when you get back on the bike when the weather's warmer, I know that, which is coming soon. It's got to. And then you've got this PET scan coming up at the end of April. Between the two, by May, you're going to know how you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, usually the beginning, you know, there's a lot of friends that bike outside in the winter. I'm kind of a wimp. I don't like biking it, but you know, I think I'll have a good. I know what my metrics are inside on the bike in terms of power meter and endurance, and I'll get a good feel for it after 2 or 3 rides to see how I'm doing. And you know, if I'm struggling, then I'll just try to improve from there. There's not much I can do about it. I don't forecast that I'll be as strong as I was a year ago or a year and a half, 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. But you never know. We'll see. I mean, it's not like I haven't been, you know, trying to stay in shape. It's just, you know, I'm combating something that I wasn't combating before.
Right. Well, look, I just want to say thank you for joining us. We wish you all the best. Let's hope that you don't have to continue to tell your sarcoidosis story to friends, family, or the rest of the world, and that you get out there and everything's fine.
I appreciate it, John. Again, I hope I can meet you sometime in person and join Royce for one of his rides. I really do appreciate all that I've learned from your podcast. You're doing a great service for folks that have this. You know, there's not that many of us that have this, but for those that do, it's been a real learning experience. And I give all credit to you for starting this. So I really appreciate it.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Thanks to Tony for sharing his story, and let's hope his bout with sarcoidosis stays under control and that pacemaker makes all the difference. Again, he will get his real first test of how he's feeling now that the weather is breaking where he lives, and he'll get back on the bicycle. And that bike is, like I tell you, it's a thermometer for me. And I watch my heart rate, and I know how I'm feeling against known hills and climbs and rides here in my area in Roanoke, Virginia. And when something's off, that bike will tell me immediately. And that'll be true for Tony as well. So let's wish him all the best. And I hope to see as many of you as possible at the Crystal Gala. That's on May 24th in Washington, D.C. And also look for the bonus episodes soon as we explore efzofitimod, the latest drug. It's from aTyr to hopefully fight sarcoidosis. And then don't forget, April is Sarcoidosis Awareness Month, and there's a lot coming up there from FSR as well, and I'll have an interview with some folks from FSR talking about all that they are doing. That will be coming out in the next episode of the FSR Sarc Fighter Podcast. The official Sarc Fighter song is called Zombie by Mark Steyer and his band, the White Hot Lizards in Canada. And you can hear Mark's story, the story that created those lyrics in episode 12. And occasionally I do play the entire song for you. And if you want to go back and listen to episode 41, you get to hear the whole song at the end. Remember, I release the Sarc Fighter Podcast every other Monday. As I'm speaking to you today, my trusty dog Dougal, a rescue boxer from the SPCA, is curled up on the chair in my office. He is sound asleep and paying no attention to what I am saying today. The backstory to the founding for the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson, who started it at their kitchen table. Don't forget to follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on Peloton as Sarc Fighter. My cycling blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has a section called Cycling with Sarcoidosis. You might want to check that out. If you're new here and you're just trying to figure out what sarcoidosis is, go back and listen to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart, and my story is episode 1. If you want to contact me, send me an email, carlinagency@gmail.com. There's a link in the show notes. I appreciate your interest in the Sarc Fighter Podcast. It helps me reach more people and grow the show if you share it on your social media, and if you like it, just tell one person. That really helps. Give the show a nice review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your downloads. And until next time, keep fighting.
Easier to grieve if I had a breath to breathe. I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling. Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting down his days. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential slipping gone. It feels too radical, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Find a way to try and adapt your life. It's not the why, but the how that plagues my mind. A new perspective, appreciate what you've got. We're dead men walking, in an instant it could be gone. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential slipping gone. It feels too radical, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. fight to be there too. And remember there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, don't let fear die.